Hi, this is Marilla Sands. Today I want to talk about writers groups because that comes up a lot. People seem to ask questions about writers groups. I think a lot of writers are looking to find those kind of support networks where they can get help. They don't feel quite so alone. When you're writing, you're pretty much alone, but then to judge your writing and to get things accomplished, sometimes you just need to have that support network, and that can be pretty hard to find. So the writers group that I belong to is called the Alternate Historians. It was started in 1988 out of a writing workshop where 14 people attended. Those 14 people decided to keep attending and to have a monthly meeting. But quite quickly, most of them dropped out. A monthly meeting can be a bit hard for some people to commit to, and other people, I guess, just didn't. They wanted to write, but not so regularly. So the group quickly got winnowed down to just a few people. I joined in January of '91. Back in those days, we had a lot more rules on how we ran things because most of us were just basically ranked beginners. We didn't have publication credits. We didn't really know much about getting published. We were just trying to improve our writing, submit our stuff to the markets that were out there, and see if we couldn't get our stuff published by various magazines and anthologies, and ultimately maybe New York publishers if we could get novels finished. So in the beginning, we had rules like if you wanted to join the group, you had to try out. You had to submit generally 3 short stories. This was not to see if you were writing at a professional level, because the goal of the group is to try to get you there. The idea was that if you had 3 short stories, it meant you could start a project and finish it at least 3 times. So that meant you were at least serious enough to write more than a scene and quit. You were going to write a story, and you were going to do it on multiple occasions. So that would be one of the things that we would look at. Also, we didn't want to critique porn. So if you submitted some things that were pornographic, we decided that we didn't really feel like we were the group for you. That's not to say there couldn't be sex scenes or anything, but literal porn we didn't do. We decided we would not do partial novels because it's really hard to critique a story arc and the character arcs if you don't see the middle or the end. We did make a couple of exceptions to that over the years. Basically, sometimes publishers will want to see like the first 3 chapters in an outline. So we would sometimes say, okay, show us the first 3 chapters in an outline, and then we would at least have an idea of, okay, this beginning, it's really grabby, or no, this is really dull, it moves very slowly, you need to pick up that pace. Whatever it was, we could try to get those 3 opening chapters to a point where we thought the editor would want to say, yes, send me the rest of the book. But otherwise, we only do whole novels so that you can see how the characters and the plot and everything evolves to the end and how all that's handled. Another rule was that you had to submit something to be critiqued every other month. So at a minimum, you would be writing 6 short stories a year. If you didn't keep up with that, we kind of let slide for a while because people are busy, whatever, we all have lives. But if after a while you just weren't submitting anything, we'd say, the rule is we have to see something from you every 2 months. We haven't seen anything from you lately. What's up? Do you have anything to submit? Are you working on anything? We try to hold each other accountable on keeping going and not just quitting or stopping, because if you want to quit, then you don't need a writer's group. One of the other things was in the beginning when we were not as good at being critiqued, because being critiqued hurts a lot. We had a rule where if you were having a novel critiqued, we did not meet at your house. So if you needed to decompress after people telling you all their comments about your novel, you could leave. You weren't still playing host to everyone else who was in the writers group. We didn't do that for short stories. It just we didn't get that upset over short story comments. But when you're going through 300 or 400 pages and it's taking hours and hours, it can be kind of hard to take. We don't really have that problem anymore. I mean, as I said, I joined in '91, so it's almost my 30th anniversary in the group. For the 2 original remaining members, Deborah Militello and Laurel K. Hamilton, they started in '88, so they're past their 30th anniversary in the group. At this point, you should be able to take whatever critique comes your way. You've just done it for so much. We found that maybe 7 people in a group works pretty well. Sometimes we've had 8 in the past. 8 gets a little wobbly, but less than 7, 6 is okay. When you start getting down to 4 or 5 people, you don't feel like you've gotten maybe enough comments or enough range of opinions to really give you the kind of critique you need to get your stuff to the best it can be. I mean, it helps, but maybe not as much as if there were you and 6 other people for a total of 7. The other, I'm taking a look at our other rules. Oh yes, you have to treat meetings like a business meeting, because we wanted to be professional writers, and writing is a business. So as far as we were concerned, that time every month when we were making a meeting, we would probably be critiquing somebody's short story, maybe more than one short story, maybe a novel. You needed to be there, and you needed to be prepared. You needed to have your critique done, and you needed to be ready to go, because this was not playtime, this is work time. We did have a person who was in the group for a very short while who didn't come to a meeting once because she and her sister wanted to go to some garage sales, and it was kind of like, if a garage sale takes the place of a business meeting, you're not serious about this. And I don't sure she ever really came back after that. But you need to have people who are going to commit. And that's one of the big hard parts, because a lot of people want to be writers, and they dream of being writers, and they see themselves as writers, but they don't put the work in. Okay, and the work is very important. Another thing is we don't let sharks into the group. Sharks is our term for people who will tear down the writer instead of critiquing the work. So it's okay to say, I thought this passage was really kind of slow. Maybe if the character did this, or maybe something else happened, or maybe this isn't required. You could just cut this whole scene out. I know you love it, but it's not really necessary for the book. That's fine. You're talking about the work. You may even be giving some suggestions on how to make it better. But you don't say, you're awful, you're a bad writer, you did this poorly, or whatever. You don't attack people. You need to critique the work, and you need to do it in a constructive way. They let someone know what is wrong, or what you think is wrong, because sometimes maybe you're wrong too when you're critiqued, but to why you think there's something here that can be improved, and maybe how it could possibly be improved. So you're being helpful. It doesn't feel helpful, that's true, but it's not cruel. It's just that it's hard to take people talking about your work critically. So our group has pretty much had a roster that's been pretty stable for probably the past 20 years, 25 years maybe. So we don't really have openings for new writers. People ask us, are you taking new people? And we're not. Part of that is because most of us have now done this long enough that we're not beginners anymore. So whereas it used to take us maybe hours to get through a short story because the critiquers maybe didn't have good enough critiquing skills, and the person who wrote it didn't have necessarily very great writing skills or taking critique skills, it could take us a very, very long time. We spent, I think 12 hours was our one marathon session, and we spent that on one book. Okay, so now we might spend an hour on a book, and that's mostly because we don't make the beginner mistakes anymore, where we're trying to point out, half of your sentences aren't grammatical, or this scene doesn't seem to follow logically from that scene, or this character does this and then 20 pages later they're doing something completely different. I don't get how they got there. Those are things where we've had those critiques enough in our past that now when we're writing, those things are kind of in the back of our minds, and we're not making those kind of mistakes anymore, generally. So we're making fewer mistakes, there's fewer things to critique, therefore the critique doesn't take nearly as long. Also, the critiquers have gotten better at finding those kind of things. So you can get some very insightful comments, or maybe 30 years ago they weren't as insightful, but people were being diligent and trying to be helpful, but maybe didn't have the critiquing skills yet either. But we've gone past that. So in terms of our group, we're not really at that level where we're trying to find other beginners to help us get to a publishable level. We all write at that level now, but now it's more like how to fine tune your stuff, where are the markets going, what do you plan to do with this kind of stuff. Whereas in the beginning it was more, how are you going to turn this into something that makes sense or is interesting, or how do you even write dialogue or develop a character arc. Now that's just how our writers group works. Other writers group do things differently. I'm pretty sure I've heard of a couple where basically they have it at a community space like a library or something, and whoever wants to shows up. You then have to read something out loud, which we never do in our group because you're not there to read out loud to the editor. So we send it out to the other people in the group as if they're editors, right? They get it in the mail. It's email these days instead of the snail mail like it used to be. But you're kind of like the editor in our group, where you get this in the mail, you're opening it up, you're reading it cold. But in some groups, they have a limit to the number of pages that can be done. So maybe you can only bring 10 pages at a time, 20 pages at a time. You then have to read it out loud, then people give you their thoughts. That wouldn't work for us, but other groups seems to work for, and maybe that kind of group would work for you. There's no one right way how to do critiquing. So you might find a group in your area that works differently than the alternate historians, but it works better than our style might work for you. So you're going to have probably issues on how to find people who are dedicated enough to stick to it and will show up and will be people you can trust. As I believe Brian Pig mentioned in his Dark Lady video on my channel, and I certainly go over and take a look at that. He mentions he's had a hard time finding writers group where there's a consistent set of people who show up. So whereas in my group, I'm going to have critiques from 5 people that I've been getting critiques from since 1991, and I know how well they write and how good they are at spotting errors and problems. So I can trust them to say if they think it doesn't work, it probably doesn't work. We used to take a bother factor vote. If some people said this worked for me and other people said, yeah, I think it's perfectly fine, it worked for me, great. Then we'd vote, and like if only it bothered one person, it probably wasn't a problem. If it bothered 2 people, maybe you should look at it. If it started bothering 3 or 4 people, you probably need to change something about it. But if you just have new people every time coming into your writers group, and it's just whoever has the time that day to come to the library or wherever you're having your meeting, it's kind of hard to build up that layer of trust because you don't know this person. You don't know how good a critiquer they are, or how good a writer they are, or how easily they spot mistakes. So maybe they tell you this doesn't work. Do you take their word or not? It works for you, right? Because it's your stuff. Does it not work for other people? Maybe, but that's tough when it might be a completely new person who's now looked at your stuff. They've seen your 10 pages of your stuff. They don't know you either. That can be difficult. So nothing about this is really easy. Fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, that's just the way it is. Writing is not easy. Critiquing is not easy. Taking critique is certainly not easy. Rewriting is not easy. Finding where you can submit your stuff is not easy. Taking rejection letters is not easy. Even if someone buys it, getting to the publication point is often not as easy as you would think. And then once it's out on the shelves, assuming it gets out on the shelves, if you have an agent or whatever, trying to get an agent is not easy. Trying to keep your agent and your publisher is not easy. Nothing about this is easy. If you want to do something easier, you need to pick something else to do. This is not it. But if it is what you want to do and you're willing to put the work in, you may be able to find other people who are just as dedicated. You might find them at science fiction conventions, like the alternate historians found each other originally at writing workshop at a science fiction convention. So those people are out there. I hope you can find them if you want to find them. And good luck on developing your skills and getting your work out there. Thanks for listening. Remember to hit like and subscribe. and little bell notification if you want to know when more episodes go up. So I appreciate it. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.